Persuasive writing. By the end of this workshop, you should know how to identify the purpose of a text and intended audience, recognise how language techniques are used and how they convey a message within the text, recognise the different types of text with acknowledgement of diverse tones used and the effect of these within the writing. So, writing persuasively, what does it mean? Just before we go on, this should have been actually part of the last the session I've just done. So at level 2, this has come from the City and Guilds Handbook. One of the tasks requires candidates to write persuasively. Markers are instructed to look for specific techniques of persuasive writing, such as repetition, emotive language, reason arguments, rhetorical questions, or appealing directly to the reader through the use of direct address, amongst others.
You'll find that, so City and Guilds is who we use for our testing, and all testing ordinary bodies, they produce examiner reports on a regular basis. And what they are is the chief examiner for each topic will look and say, what are generally the trends that people are getting, generally people are doing quite well. So often it will say one of the things people aren't so good at is punctuation, but grammar is really good and those kind of things. And this came out a little while ago from saying that what they felt was that when people were asked to write persuasively, they were writing fine and it might be spelt correctly and laid out correctly and all those kind of things, but actually whether there is enough there in people being persuasive. So as it said there, it said they want to see things like some of the things that Amy's already covered, like repetition, emotive language, rhetorical questions, appealing directly to the reader. So although many of those language techniques are related to reading, actually it's then using those when you're actually writing a piece. And it is this kind of, and we'll go on to it, but it is this key thing about if you're asked to write persuasively, that's very different. If you have to write a report on something, then you don't have to persuade people, you just report it on it. If you have to write persuasively, that is quite a skill in itself.
Yeah, perfect. Super. So, audience and purpose. An audience is the person or people who read your actual text. So obviously when you're doing your exams, your audience will be your examiner. So just be wary who, whatever you're writing, just in your head think, actually, who's going to be reading my newspaper article? Who's going to be reading my letter? Who's going to be reading my email? Because you need to know who your target audience is. So again, when you know who your audience is, that's when you'll identify whether it's a formal piece of writing or informal. And I'll go through that later on in the PowerPoint, what kinds of text fall into both categories. You might see a text level of formality referred to as a register. And the purpose of a text is the reason it is written. So an example of it is to explain, to persuade. So for the reader to understand why it is you're actually writing. So yeah, formal and informal writing. Know the style of writing. This information that are in the next few slides have come from the CPG books, which are linked directly with City and Guilds. So a lot of the assessments in the books are what your actual assessments will refer back to as well. So your writing can be formal or informal. Formal writing sounds serious. It usually has an impersonal tone. It's used for things like articles, job application forms, so it sounds more professional. So an example of that is the substitute goalkeeper had to play in lieu of Yang, who had suffered an injury in the first half. So in lieu is a formal way of saying instead. Who had is a more formal way of saying who'd. So your abbreviation words, try not use them in formal text because it is more of an informal category. So your informal writing sounds chatty. It usually has a personal or conversational tone. It's used for things like letters to your friends or your family because it is deemed as more friendly. So don't throw your back out. Make sure your boss gives you all the right training if you have to lift stuff at work. So your informal writing uses shortened words and slang. Slang is your language technique we went through in the last session. So they pick that up. If you do have a letter that is informal, they've already picked that technique up that they've used. So an example of it is the word boss is used instead of manager. So I mean, in my previous jobs, I've always referred to my manager as boss because it is that slang technique. But the learners, because it was classroom based, the learners picked up on that. So when they had an informal task, they knew that was not the correct terminology for the formal writing. It would be for informal.
Is one of the first things to judge in the writing is what kind of style of writing are you doing. So as we mentioned before, and I'll come back to is what it's for, but actually formal and informal is key. If you're asked to write a letter of complaint to I don't know, to MP, then obviously you're probably going to write that more formal than if it says write an email to your mate in Australia and asking how the kids are. So clearly you can see there's going to be a difference between those two. And sometimes it'll say write a formal letter or an informal email, but what you want to do is look at the scenario and just think. Functional skills, as we say many a time, is called functional skills on purpose because it's meant to be everyday functioning. So if it says write an email to somebody you know well, every day, if you were doing that every day, you would write it probably in a more informal tone. If it says write a letter of complaint, then if you're writing a formal letter every day, you would probably write that more formal. So just think, what would you do in a real situation and adapt it to the actual question from the test.
Perfect, yeah. Super. So your personal and impersonal tone. Writing can have both personal or an impersonal tone. So your personal writing sounds like you're talking to the actual reader. It's written from the writer's point of view, so it's full of opinions and it shows emotion. So an example of that was, I was delighted to hear that the council are going to improve the cycle lanes. It means I will be able to cycle to work safely. So the I was delighted is a personal writing gives the writer's opinion. It says what they think. And the I is the direct use of language. So again, without even knowing, you've picked up two techniques there. So you're using emotional language as well as giving that direct address. Your impersonal writing doesn't tell you anything about the writer's personality. It just reports the facts. So it's usually neutral and it doesn't take anybody's side. So local people have welcomed the council's plans to improve the cycle lanes. It means they can cycle to work safely. So your first sentence is impersonal writing doesn't usually give an opinion. And then the second sentence where they use they, it's just referring to something as a whole rather than directing it to somebody.
One of the things that often comes up in the level 2 writing test is to write an article. Now, it's not expecting you to write for The Guardian or something. They mean it's usually the staff newsletter or the local paper. And while you could probably go two ways of that, because you can write it from your own point of view. Articles, if you read a newspaper, is usually that bottom one. It's more impersonal, so it writes about them. So it's probably one of the hardest techniques for people to get used to. If you're not used to writing articles and things, you would always usually write something from your own point of view, an email, a letter, whatever. So that's one of the things to bear in mind. If you are asked to write an article reporting or describing something, and you may be trying to use a bit more of that impersonal side because you're, as it says, you're reporting on what has happened or what you imagine to have happened rather than giving your own point of view.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Perfect. So the writing style. So you need to know what kind of writing style you're actually using in your text. Make sure your writing style is suitable for the audience and the purpose. The audience is, so here it's write a leaflet for new guests telling them what is on offer at your hotel. So the audience are the guests and the purpose of the actual text is to tell them about the hotel. Once you start to get acknowledgement of your audience and the purpose, you will know automatically what you're doing. And again, we probably do it in day-to-day practice. We have conversations and, you know, you're talking about certain situations where you know where your audience is. And then again, the context of the information will give you the purpose as well. So our hotel has lots to offer. Our facilities include a heated outdoor swimming pool and satellite TV. We also provide delicious breakfast. The writing there would be formal. So the second example, write an email to your friend persuading him to sponsor you. Your audience is your friend. The purpose is for him to persuade you. The purpose is for you to persuade him to sponsor you. And the writing would be informal because you're writing to a friend. So yes, the conversation, you might weave a bit of formality of it, but it will be more of an informal conversation. Please can I stress, when you have a mock exam or an actual exam, the drafting is quite important, and a lot of people say it's not. Of course it is. You need to know what you're writing in your actual text. It's not difficult. It's quick bullet points, a few words here and there for your structure of your paragraphs, because you could go into straight the writing, but your structure might not be there. And again, I'll go through that next week when the next session is on how you structure your paragraphs to how it all weaves in. But drafting is so important.
Sorry, I mean, I think one of the things with planning as well is it just means that then when you're writing, if you've already, and we're not talking about spending 20 minutes doing it, we'll make it a short list. So if you've got an idea of what you're going to write and you're going to end up with 4 paragraphs and you know you're mentioning these 3 bullet points, you can then when you're writing focus on your spelling, your punctuation and your grammar, because you know what the content's going to be because you've spent some time, a few minutes, couple of minutes, whatever it might be, thinking about what you're going to write. So you can actually then focus a little bit more rather than thinking I've got to type everything down. You know what you're going to write, so that pressure's off. So if you like, the pressure can move to making sure your spelling, punctuation, and grammar are right, and rather than thinking what was it that I was going to write next. I mean, I'll perfectly honest, I'm not a great planner. I'm somebody who tends to jump in with things, but Aim's spot on it for the test. It's really important just to you can have some pen and paper by your side. That's absolutely fine. Have as much pen and paper as you want. We don't take those in terms of they're not submitted or anything like that. It's just for your notes. But yeah, taking some time to do that is really useful.
Perfect. So making a plan before you start your writing. So planning your answer will help you obviously put your ideas across. A plan doesn't need to be full sentences. Like I said, it could be bullet points. It could be a mind map where you've got a load of branches coming out and just jotting things down. Make sure you only write points that answer the question. So again, I know it's so easy, and I do it as well. When you're writing something and you're trying to get the point across and you waffle on and on and on and you go off the point, try and refer your whatever you're trying to say back to the question, because your examiner, your marker, will know actually they've said something, they've gone off a bit, but they've come back to the question, so it all links back in again. You'll be given space to plan your answer in the test. It won't be marked. You can also use this planning space to do a first draft if you need to. I don't really think you do need to, but if you do need, it's there. So you use your notes to write your plan. So work out who your audience and your purpose is. Automatically, when you're reading that question, you'll know yourself, actually, this is my audience and this is my purpose. And from that, you can link on to whether it'll be a formal piece of text or an informal. So write down the points you want to include, organize your points so that the most important, obviously, idea comes first. And if you're giving bullet points in the question, you could include them in your actual plan as well. So an example of this is write an email to your council telling them about your problems in your town. So the council is the audience. The purpose is to inform them about the problems in your town. And then you're bullet pointing them. So your audience council is obviously formal. The purpose is to inform. So you've got 3 bullet points: potholes in the road, making driving dangerous. Number 2, not enough street lighting, unsafe at night. And number 3, littering on pavements, it attracts rats. So you're identifying what you want to say and then why you're saying it. Does that make sense, Paul?
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect.
The writing test at level 2, you get 1 hour and 20 minutes to do, and you write, type 2 documents. So my guide to people is if you spend half an hour on the first one, then half an hour on the second one, you've still got 20 minutes to go back and check them and make additions and things like that. So half an hour is a good, I think, compared to maybe the reading test and the maths test, which can be a little bit tight for time. I think most people find, I'm not saying you're going to finish after 20 minutes, but most people find the writing test is a little bit less forced for time. So half an hour is a good amount of time. So you have got some time at the start. As I said, we're not talking about spending 10 minutes doing it, but spend a couple of minutes making those notes. And so that when you do start writing, as I say, you've got at least an idea of where you're going in each paragraph to get to the end and to focus on the other things. And you've still got plenty of time then at the end to come back and check your answers and see if there's any option to add. Yeah,
perfect. But even a lot of people get mistaken with how much words or how many paragraphs are going into it. Yeah, there is. I think it's roughly, with the new reforms, it's 4 to 8 paragraphs. However, if you structure it to your language techniques are flying through and you're putting in what the examiner wants to see, you might not even hit 8 paragraphs. It might be 5 paragraphs and you'll be marked at 90%. So again, it's the context that you're putting into the actual level of information. Why is writing important and how does it link in with persuasive writing? So persuasive writing convinces the reader to do something. It comes under different types of writing examples. So if you're writing an email asking for volunteers, you need to be persuasive. If you're writing a letter of complaint, you may persuade the audience to give you a refund. Again, the letter in the previous example was informal because you're writing to a friend. A letter of complaint will obviously be formal because you're writing to an organisation, a company, wherever you need this refund from. You might need to write a letter or an email asking someone to take part in a community fundraising activity. That could go both formal or informal, depending on who you're actually writing to. With the level 2 criteria, I know that they've introduced speeches, articles they already was doing anyway, and they're bringing in blogs as well. So again, the next few sessions, I'm going to try and cover certain activities that will support you with your writing. So this is an exam style question. It's very similar to what City and Guilds will ask you in your exam. So you want to enter the competition below. It's a deserved break. Here at Relax Holidays, we're giving away a 7-day holiday to Barbados to whoever we think really deserves a break. So if someone who works really hard has no time to relax, or someone who has gone through a tough patch needs to get away from it all, get in touch. Write us a short letter and give us plenty of reasons why you think you deserve a break. Who knows, you might get that break you deserve. And then the contact details. So the task is write a letter to persuade the staff at Relax Holidays to award you the free holiday. Remember, think about the layout and the tone of your letter. Give reasons to why you should be chosen. And then they give you the space underneath to draft and then write. Already looking at that, you know the audience is who you're writing to, and you're persuading the members of staff to let you win this holiday. So what I want you to do is 30 minutes, like Paul said. When you have that 30 minutes, obviously you're all working on it and you understand, try and complete this task. I don't want to see who's amazing, who's not. I just want to see what levels you're all at, because we're still at the very beginning of the course. I just want to identify where you're all at. And from that, we can start putting a structure together it might be punctuation that you need support on. It might be identifying the language techniques. It could be anything. But it gives me that idea to see, because you're all doing it online, I can see something myself to say, actually, they've done this and this is what they need to do to support themselves. And I can support you with that. And I'm sure Paul can from his end as well.
We'll send out the recording, a link to the recording and these slides afterwards, and we'll send that out. So as Simon says, if you'd like to give that one a go, that's quite good, I think. I mean, one thing that jumps at me there is it says, if you're someone who works really hard and has no time to relax, or someone who's gone through a tough patch, well, if you're going to persuade them, they've given you 2 answers you could possibly do there, isn't it? They've said, so I would think, am I going to put that on someone who works? I'd probably do both. I'll probably put something about working hard, no time to relax, and I'd probably put a tough patch that I've gone through. So it's sort of given me that. So my bullet points would be introduction, but then it would be works really hard, brackets, and I'd put, I don't know, maybe I'm working the NHS, someone's gone through a tough patch, and I put tough patch illness. And I know that there's 2 things I want to mention there that's going to persuade them, because they've sort of given you that hint, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, you can even create it.
Sorry, would you say would you say this is going to be a formal reply?
You can use it both. You can take it to informal or formal, but you're trying to sell yourself, aren't you, as a person? So whichever way you go, you have to be consistent with that. So you can't start informal and then go formal, and you can't start formal and go informal.
So so you want us to do this and just send that off to you just to see where we are?
Yeah.
Would you say, like, is that handwritten or typed up?
Typed up, whatever, however it works well with you guys. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
So the only thing I'd be aware in the real test is you don't get spell checks. So if you are using Word or something to try not to rely on the spell check or the grammar check. What I sometimes suggest people is do it in something like Notepad or something you've got on the computer that doesn't do your spell check for you, so that then we get a real idea of your spelling, punctuation, grammar.
Where you're at, yeah, of course. And also, just going back to what Paul had said, use the current climate as an example. We're all in this COVID-19 situation, and we all deserve a holiday. So for me, I'd relate it to something in real life, and it'll help you build on your writing tasks.
Yeah, one of the things sometimes people say to me is I'm not very good at my imagination, which is true. Some people are more imaginative than others, but don't then make it real if you want. The marker isn't going to know you or know them. I do remember many years ago seeing somebody spend ages trying to come up with their address, because they need to put their address at the top of the letter. And you probably wouldn't use your own address, but just put number 3 I don't know, Chicken Street, doesn't matter what it's called. And they were spending it for the first 10 minutes. They hadn't written their address. And when I spoke to him afterwards, he went, couldn't you say what to put as the address? I was like, well, anything? Just think of the next road to you, or put your real address, because nobody will actually know if it's your real address or not. So don't worry about too much being imaginative. If you can make it real, if you've got a real scenario, put it down, because that just saves you having to, you don't have to come up with a fantastical thing. You can put, it says there, you've gone through a tough patch, need to get away. It may just be that you had a cold, or as you say, in the current climate, that something like that's happened. Don't feel you have to be Shakespeare and come up with the most imaginative thing that you've ever seen.
Yeah, perfect. I would say look at the language techniques that we've gone back to today, as well as the ones that we went through in the last session, because the ones that we've gone through today are what the examiners are going to be wanting to see. So if you are, again, how one of your learners said, Paul, if you are using an informal tone, keep that consistent. And if you're using formal, keep that consistent as well, because you are selling yourself. So think about your tone when you're writing it. Has anyone got any more questions on that bit? Nope. So, any questions at all? No, I like this as well.
We'll take that as good. Thanks, Simon.